For decades, humanity has gazed into the dark ocean of the cosmos, convinced we already understood its rules. But sometimes, a single discovery is enough to shake that confidence to its core. In early 2020, telescopes around the world detected something crossing our solar system, an object unlike anything seen before. They named it 3I/Atlas. At first, scientists thought it was just another icy wanderer, a comet drifting endlessly through space. But as data began to flow in, it became clear that this was no ordinary visitor. Its orbit made no sense, its brightness behaved like a coded signal, and its structure defied every model known to science. Some called it a cosmic coincidence. Others whispered about something artificial. Now, with only 72 hours before a new event connected to 3I/Alice unfolds, researchers are holding their breath. Because if the predictions are true, what's about to happen could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the universe. The discovery of 3I/Atlas began like many cosmic stories do, with a flicker of light that should not have been there. It was the end of March 2020 when the automated survey telescope Atlas, perched atop a Hawaiian peak, picked up a faint moving object against the dark canvas of the sky. At first glance, it looked like a harmless blur, another comet making its lonely voyage toward the sun. But astronomers have learned that sometimes the smallest anomalies carry the biggest secrets. Within hours, data from other observatories began to arrive, and what they saw didn't fit the usual script of a wandering ball of ice and dust. Its trajectory didn't curve gently into the familiar pull of our star. It cut across the solar system as if it had no intention of staying. The math told a chilling story. This object wasn't bound by the gravity of the sun at all. It came from somewhere else, somewhere outside. They named it 3I/Atlas, 3I for the third interstellar object ever detected by humankind. Before it, there had only been two known visitors, the mysterious cigar-shaped Oumuamua and the more traditional comet Borisov. Both had already left astronomers with more questions than answers. But Atlas was different. It glowed strangely, like it was alive, changing brightness from night to night in ways that didn't match any model. Some said it was breaking apart, others thought its surface was reflecting sunlight off hidden metallic fragments. The truth was, nobody knew, and that uncertainty became the spark that reignited the global obsession with interstellar visitors. In those first few days, excitement mixed with disbelief. Astronomers from Chile, Spain, and Japan pointed their telescopes toward the coordinates shared by the Atlas team. They confirmed the sighting. There it was, a pale traveler moving faster than anything natural had a right to move. Even the veterans of deep sky surveys were stunned by its velocity and the angle of approach. It wasn't entering the solar system in a random path. It was slicing through it, as if following a route already charted long before. Some thought of it as a cosmic coincidence. Others began whispering comparisons to Oumuamua, the object Harvard's Avi Loeb had famously suggested might have been a piece of alien technology. That theory, once dismissed as science fiction, suddenly didn't seem so impossible anymore. In the following weeks, observatories and space agencies raced to collect as much data as possible before 3I/Atlas vanished again into the black. They measured its brightness curve, tracked its dust tail, analyzed the color spectrum of its coma. Every observation deepened the mystery. Its core seemed unstable, but not in the way comets usually behave. Typical comets release gas as they warm, creating tails that follow predictable patterns. Atlas, however, pulsed, would dim and flare unpredictably as if something inside it were switching on and off. Some data suggested that it might even have released short bursts of energy. To the public, those rumors sounded like fantasy, but to the scientists staring at the graphs at 3 a.m., they were a source of genuine unease. Even more puzzling was its chemical fingerprint. When astronomers looked at its composition through spectroscopy, they found traces of substances that didn't belong together. Ices that should have vaporized long ago, elements rarely seen in comets of our region, and dust particles that behave strangely in ultraviolet light. It was as if the object had been assembled in an environment unlike anything known near our galactic neighborhood. One scientist described it as a fragment of a world we've never seen. Another called it a messenger from the unknown. And as poetic as those descriptions sounded, they weren't far from the truth, because the more they looked, the less sense it made. By April 2020, the comet's approach reached its peak brightness. Amateur astronomers captured hauntingly beautiful images of it, a teal green sphere surrounded by a faint halo, like a ghost crossing the night sky. But even that beauty hid chaos. Atlas began to disintegrate faster than expected, splitting into several fragments that continued to move along similar paths. The disintegration should have meant the end of the story, yet for many scientists, it was only the beginning. Because when they calculated how it broke apart, the numbers didn't align with any known mechanical stress or solar influence. Something else had caused the fragmentation, something from within. And here's where the story takes a turn from scientific curiosity to near philosophical unease. Objects from outside our solar system are supposed to be accidents, random debris ejected from the formation of distant stars. Yet 3I/Atlas didn't behave like debris. It behaved like a system. Every fragment moved in a strangely coordinated pattern, as if obeying invisible instructions. Some scientists joked about it being a self-destructing probe. Others laughed nervously, but the data was there. The motion of its pieces was unnaturally synchronized, a pattern so precise that, for a moment, even skeptics fell silent. As news spread, online forums, science podcasts, and social media exploded with theories. Some called it the next Oumuamua, others saw it as proof that humanity was being observed. Conspiracy channels turned it into prophecy. Mainstream outlets kept a cautious tone, quoting NASA's official statements that dismissed any suggestion of artificial origin. But inside closed scientific circles, debates grew more intense. Was this object really natural? And if not, what kind of civilization could create something capable of crossing interstellar space and disintegrating with mathematical precision? Meanwhile, something else quietly emerged, a signal, not a radio transmission in the traditional sense, but a pattern in the fluctuations of brightness. When plotted over time, the light curve of Atlas revealed a repeating rhythm, almost musical in nature. Some dismissed it as coincidence, an artifact of measurement error. Others, however, pointed out that no known comet or asteroid produces such stable, periodic variations. The data was unsettling. Every flare and dimming seemed to correspond to a geometric sequence, like a heartbeat echoing across light years. Astronomers at several observatories independently confirmed the pattern but hesitated to publish. The world was already dealing with a pandemic. The last thing anyone needed was a cosmic mystery that could spiral into hysteria. By the time the object faded beyond detection, it had already left an imprint on scientific history. It was cataloged, archived, and classified as an interstellar comet, yet everyone involved knew that comet was a placeholder for something we didn't understand. Months later, when researchers reviewed all the data collected during its passage, strange anomalies began to reappear. Energy readings slightly higher than expected, fragments that seemed to vanish faster than light models predicted, and, most notably, spectral gaps that no instrument could explain. In simpler terms, parts of the signal were missing, as if the object had absorbed specific frequencies instead of reflecting them. That shouldn't happen in nature. This mystery reopened an old debate among scientists and philosophers alike, the question of whether we'd even recognize alien technology if it appeared right in front of us. Would we mistake it for a rock, a cloud of dust, or a natural phenomenon too advanced for our comprehension? 3I/Atlas became the symbol of that question, the idea that we might have already encountered something extraordinary and failed to notice, just like ancient humans might have walked past a polished gemstone without realizing it was shaped by hands. In the years since its disappearance, new data has surfaced, fragments detected again, unusual electromagnetic disturbances aligned with its projected trajectory. And now, a countdown 72 hours to an event linked to the same coordinates. No one knows what's about to happen. Some claim it's the re entry of a surviving fragment. Others whisper that it's something far more deliberate. But one thing is certain: the discovery of 3I/Atlas was not the end of its story. It was merely the first act in a mystery that might force us to rethink our place in the universe. Because sometimes the universe doesn't send us messages in words or signals. Sometimes it sends us visitors. For centuries, humanity believed that everything within our solar system moved according to predictable laws: planets orbiting in perfect rhythm, comets tracing elegant ellipses around the sun before retreating into the dark. Then came 3I/Atlas, a traveler that ignored those laws completely. When astronomers first mapped its path, they expected to find the usual pattern: a curve shaped by the sun's gravity, bending gently as it approached, and then looping away. But 3I/Atlas refused to play by the rules. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, not elliptical. In simple terms, that meant one thing: it wasn't coming back. This was not a local object captured by our star's pool. It was an intruder passing through on a one-way journey from the unknown. At first, scientists thought the measurements were wrong. How could an object move so fast and at such an impossible angle? They recalculated, rechecked, compared data between observatories in Chile, Hawaii, and the Canary Islands. The results were consistent. 3I/Atlas had entered our solar system on a path that no natural body should have been able to take. Its incoming velocity was over 50 kilometers per second, far beyond the escape velocity of the sun. That meant nothing in our cosmic neighborhood could have thrown it here. It had come from interstellar space, from the frozen emptiness between stars, carrying with it the chemical fingerprints of another world. But its trajectory held an even deeper riddle. Objects from beyond the solar system tend to move randomly, thrown out by distant collisions or dying suns. Yet 3I/Atlas arrived at a near perfect alignment with the plane of our planets, as if it had deliberately aimed to pass close to Earth's orbit. Statistically, that should be nearly impossible, like shooting a grain of sand across the ocean and having it skim the surface of another grain floating miles away. Even the angle of its entry suggested intent. Some called it cosmic coincidence, others quietly used the word guidance. As it approached, astronomers plotted simulations to see how the sun's gravity would affect its path. Instead of being pulled smoothly toward the center, the object made a series of subtle but measurable deviations. It was as if something inside it was adjusting its route, resisting gravitational influence in ways that no natural structure could. Some observers suggested it was simply fragmenting, and that the released gases were acting like miniature thrusters, altering its motion. But when they calculated the forces involved, the numbers didn't add up. The accelerations were too precise, too clean, too symmetrical to be random. It was almost as if the object were steering. That idea made most scientists uncomfortable. To admit the possibility of control meant stepping into territory that academia isn't built to navigate: the idea that we might be witnessing technology, not geology. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb had already faced criticism for proposing that Oumuamua, the first interstellar object, might have been artificial. Now, with 3I/Atlas displaying similar anomalies, the whispers began again. Was this another interstellar artifact? Or worse, was it part of something larger? The deeper they analyzed, the more unsettling it became. 3I/Atlas wasn't just passing through. It was moving through regions of the solar system where it could gather information. Near the orbit of Mars, skimming close enough to Earth's space to be tracked by defense satellites, then heading toward the outer planets. Every step seemed deliberate, as if it had chosen a route that maximized observation opportunities. And when fragments began to separate, they didn't scatter randomly. They drifted in a graceful formation, maintaining consistent spacing for days, almost like a fleet maintaining formation in the sky. The public never heard about most of this. Officially, it was described as an interstellar comet undergoing spontaneous disintegration. But within the scientific community, private communications revealed growing unease. Teams at the European Space Agency and NASA exchanged encrypted emails discussing non-gravitational acceleration patterns, while private observatories speculated about reflective surfaces, possibly metallic, within the object's structure. One observatory in Japan even reported a brief radar echo, a strange reflection that lasted only a second but indicated a surface smoother than ice or rock. It was dismissed as a technical glitch, yet it haunted the minds of those who saw the data. Then came the simulation that changed everything. When researchers at the University of Cambridge tried to model 3I/Atlas's movement through the solar system, they discovered something strange. Its trajectory mirrored that of an object launched intentionally to study planetary orbits. If someone had wanted to send a probe to observe our system, this is exactly the path it would have taken, entering at high velocity, looping through the inner planets, and escaping through the outer edge near Jupiter. It wasn't proof of anything, but the resemblance was too close to ignore. In cosmic terms, the precision was staggering. The odds of a random interstellar rock following such an optimized trajectory were 1 in billions. But science is cautious by nature, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So the official reports avoided conclusions. They described the trajectory as anomalous but consistent with natural variation. Yet between the lines, the unease was obvious. Astronomers are trained to find order in chaos, to look for the simplest explanation. But what if the simplest explanation wasn't natural at all? By mid-April, 3I/Atlas had already begun to move away from the sun, its fragments still glimmering faintly, traced thin lines of dust that stretched like ghostly trails behind it. When telescopes zoomed in, they noticed something bizarre. The fragments weren't dispersing at random speeds. Instead, they moved in proportional acceleration, like gears turning in perfect harmony. One scientist described it as watching a clockwork machine dissolve. Another said it felt like the choreography of an ending. For the first time, the data didn't just suggest motion, it suggested purpose. And so the question arose, what kind of purpose could exist behind an object like this? If it truly came from another system, why send it here? Was it a relic, a probe, or a message? Some theorized it was a failed construct, launched eons ago and wandering aimlessly until fate brought it near our sun. Others proposed a more unsettling thought, that it was never meant to survive its journey, that its purpose was in its destruction. The precise trajectory, the timed disintegration, the fragments maintaining formation, all could be components of an ancient delivery mechanism releasing information not through radio but through behavior, a message written in motion, decipherable only to those who noticed its rhythm. To understand how strange this is, imagine standing on a beach and throwing a bottle into the ocean. Centuries later, it reaches another shore, breaking apart on arrival, scattering its contents into the sand. For the person who finds it, there's no letter inside, only fragments, patterns, and symbols to interpret. That's what 3I/Atlas was to us, a bottle from another shore of the galaxy, arriving broken but intentional. We may never know who sent it or why, but its path, that impossible trajectory, was the signature of something intelligent, or at least something guided. Even now, years later, researchers are re-examining the archived data. They've noticed new irregularities, faint electromagnetic echoes along the object's path, almost like breadcrumbs left behind. Satellite systems in high orbit recorded brief but measurable interference when the fragments passed near Earth's magnetic field. None of it was strong enough to suggest a transmission, but the coincidence was too consistent to dismiss. The trajectory, the deviations, the synchronization, all pieces of a puzzle that refuses to fade. And now, as the countdown to the predicted event linked to 3I/Atlas reaches its final 72 hours, those same scientists are watching the sky once again. The coordinates match, the signals repeat, and the same eerie rhythm detected in 2020 is pulsing faintly once more. If the object, or whatever remains of it, is returning, then its trajectory wasn't a random escape path. It was a loop, a circuit, a course designed to come back after a specific amount of time, perhaps not to be seen again, but to complete something. Maybe a signal, maybe a cycle, or maybe the beginning of contact. Because in the story of 3I/Atlas, the trajectory itself might be the message, a map not of where it's been, but of what it's meant to show us. That in a universe ruled by gravity and chance, something or someone out there still has the ability to draw straight lines through chaos. When scientists talk about orbits, they usually talk about order. The universe may seem chaotic, but celestial mechanics are predictable. Planets, asteroids, and comets all obey the same invisible law written by gravity. But when the data on 3I/Atlas was finally processed in detail, something didn't add up. Its path wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Instead of falling neatly into an arc around the sun, the object moved in a curve that no natural body should follow. Its speed, its angle, and even its direction of approach made no sense within the rules of orbital mechanics. 3I/Atlas was moving as if it had no master, no allegiance to any gravitational well. It behaved like it was free. At first, the astrophysicists blamed human error. There had to be a miscalculation somewhere, a faulty reading, a distortion in the data caused by atmospheric interference. But after hundreds of independent measurements from telescopes around the world, the truth was undeniable. 3I/Atlas wasn't being pulled by the sun in the way every other object is. It resisted. It defied the curve. Its orbit wasn't elliptical, circular, or even parabolic. It was hyperbolic, with a velocity that ensured it would escape the solar system forever. That alone was shocking, but what truly disturbed the experts was how perfectly this path avoided all major planets, weaving between them as though it knew where they were. It was like watching a skilled pilot navigate an obstacle course designed by the cosmos itself. Every encounter it could have had, a gravitational slingshot off Jupiter, a collision path near Mars, or a capture by the sun's influence, was elegantly avoided. The probabilities were astronomical. The chance that a random rock from interstellar space could pass so close to Earth without any gravitational correction was near zero. Yet 3I/Atlas did it flawlessly, slicing through the void like it was following a map drawn in advance. It wasn't luck, it was precision. In orbital terms, such precision is breathtaking. Even spacecraft launched by human hands, guided by decades of engineering and computation, struggle to achieve similar accuracy. When NASA sends probes to Mars, they rely on constant corrections, micro adjustments, and gravitational assists. 3I/Atlas, on the other hand, showed no such need. It seemed to predict the gravitational fields around it, to anticipate them, and alter its movement with seamless precision. This behavior baffled the scientists tracking it. If it wasn't natural, then what was it? And if it was, then nature had just revealed a side we'd never seen before. The deeper they studied its motion, the more unsettling the findings became. The comet's acceleration changed slightly as it passed different regions of the solar system. Normally, comets experience what's called outgassing. When sunlight heats their surface, frozen gases escape, creating jets that push the body in unpredictable ways. But the acceleration of 3I/Atlas wasn't random. It followed a rhythm. Every change in speed matched a repeating pattern, as though controlled by an internal mechanism. This wasn't chaotic melting ice, it was choreography. At the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy, a team led by Dr. Eric Kappel created a 3D model of its motion. What they found shocked them. When plotted in time-lapse, the path of 3I/Atlas through the solar system formed a smooth, wave-like curve, oscillating with near-perfect periodicity. It was too ordered, too deliberate. If this were a human-made craft, Kappel said during a private call, I would call it course correction. The phrase leaked later through a journal discussion forum, sparking one of the biggest online debates in modern astronomy. Could an interstellar object be guiding itself? Of course, skepticism ruled the official narrative. NASA's reports described the orbit as consistent with natural interstellar motion. But off the record, data analysts whispered that the numbers didn't fit the equations. Some began comparing it to the previous interstellar visitor, Oumuamua, which had also shown unexplained acceleration. Two anomalies separated by years, both exhibiting impossible trajectories. The odds of that being coincidence were microscopic. Something was happening beyond our current understanding. And 3I/Atlas was the latest piece of that puzzle. Meanwhile, independent astronomers noticed a secondary anomaly. The angle at which sunlight reflected off the comet's fragments changed in patterns too regular to be random. It was as if large, flat surfaces, reflective panels maybe, were adjusting position relative to the sun. At first, this was dismissed as a data artifact, but when three separate observatories confirmed the same readings, the question resurfaced: what kind of natural body could produce symmetrical reflections at consistent intervals? Some compared it to solar sails, the technology humans have only begun to test for space propulsion. Was it possible that nature had created something similar by accident? Or was it imitation, a form built by intention, not coincidence? As 3I/Atlas approached perihelion, the point closest to the sun, its speed peaked at over 70 kilometers per second. By then, even veteran scientists began describing it in human terms: steering, maneuvering, avoiding, because how else could you describe something that behaved as if aware of its surroundings? Telescopes captured faint trails extending from its sides, but unlike cometary tails, they didn't curve away from the sun as expected. Instead, they shifted orientation periodically, like adjustable fins. The explanation that fragmentation caused this was thin. The fragments were not chaotic. They followed synchronized arcs, keeping steady distances from one another. If chaos had rules, 3I/Atlas had mastered them. Across online communities, theories multiplied. Some called it a probe, a messenger from another civilization. Others believed it was an ancient artifact, a piece of forgotten technology drifting through the stars, still following pre-programmed instructions. More conservative voices suggested an unknown type of natural object, something that formed under conditions we couldn't replicate or imagine. But even they couldn't explain its awareness of gravity wells or its uncanny avoidance of every major planetary body in its path. Whatever 3I/Atlas was, it wasn't behaving like an accident. Then came a discovery that made the impossible even stranger. A group of data scientists at the European Southern Observatory analyzed the object's trajectory over time and noticed something extraordinary. When mapped onto a galactic coordinate grid, not just within the solar system, but relative to the Milky Way, 3I/Atlas's path aligned with a larger, coherent pattern. It wasn't drifting randomly through the galaxy. It was following a straight vector across thousands of light years, as though moving from one specific point in space to another. And Earth, by sheer coincidence or something else, happened to lie exactly on that line. If this trajectory had been traced backward, it would have originated from an area near the constellation Lyra, the same region where the famous WOW signal of 1977 was detected. When the researchers realized this, silence fell over the conference call. No one wanted to say the obvious. Yet the data didn't lie. The coordinates matched within the margin of error. A path from Lyra to our sun, moving at a velocity suggesting it had traveled for millions of years. Was it just cosmic alignment, or had someone, aimed it here on purpose? In science, patterns are everything, but sometimes patterns feel too human. The way 3I/Atlas curved, paused, accelerated, and broke apart seemed to tell a story, one that language couldn't yet translate. Its orbit was not just a route, it was a message written in the geometry of motion. And if we could read it, perhaps we'd understand why it came and why it left fragments behind, as though leaving breadcrumbs for us to find. Maybe it wasn't meant to be understood by sight, but by observation, a test of attention from a distant mind. Today, long after its passage, 3I/Atlas continues to haunt every simulation, every model that tries to explain it. No matter how advanced the equations become, there remains a small, stubborn remainder, a fraction that won't balance, a curve that won't align. That remainder is where the mystery lives, because within that imperfection hide the hint of something else, something that knows we're watching, something that might already be on its way back. And as the countdown ticks closer to zero, 72 hours before the projected event connected to its trajectory, the sky feels different. The instruments hum, the data grows stranger, and the same coordinates that marked its entry 5 years ago now shimmer with unexplained signals. Maybe coincidence has returned. Or maybe, for the first time, we're about to find out what happens when the impossible orbit completes its circle. When light travels through space, it tells stories. Every flicker, every change in brightness carries information: distance, temperature, chemical composition, age. But sometimes light lies. When astronomers first began recording the brightness of 3I/Atlas, they noticed immediately that something was wrong. It didn't shine like an ordinary comet. Most comets follow a predictable curve. They brighten as they approach the sun, peak in luminosity, and then fade symmetrically as they move away.
3I/Atlas defied this pattern completely.
Its light pulsed. It would flare with sudden intensity, then dim into near invisibility, and then, inexplicably, return to brilliance, all in cycles too structured to be random. It was as if something inside it was turning on and off. At first, scientists assumed that the fluctuations were caused by fragmentation, pieces breaking off and reflecting sunlight differently. But the rhythm was too steady. A normal breakup produces chaotic variations, not repeating pulses. When the data from multiple observatories were combined, the light curve revealed something extraordinary. The fluctuations followed a pattern similar to a coded sequence. Every brightening event lasted almost exactly the same duration, separated by evenly spaced intervals of dimming. It was as though the object was transmitting a silent message, one written not in radio, but in light. NASA's official statement described it as a complex reflection pattern likely caused by rotation. That was the safe answer. A rotating object could, in theory, explain the periodicity if its surface had regions with varying reflectivity, bright ice patches, darker rocky areas. But even under that model, the data didn't fit. The brightness increased too quickly and faded too slowly, suggesting that the reflecting surface was not fixed but actively changing. In simple terms, it looked like 3I/Atlas was controlling its reflectivity. Across the scientific world, this anomaly became known as the brightness enigma. Researchers from Chile's Paranal Observatory to Japan's Subaru telescope tried to replicate the readings, and they all saw the same thing: a rhythm, faint but undeniable. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others began to whisper the unthinkable. One astrophysicist described it as a heartbeat in the dark. Another, more cautious, called it photometric modulation inconsistent with rotation. The truth was simpler, but far stranger. Something about 3I/Atlas was actively shaping how it interacted with sunlight. The problem deepened when the object began to disintegrate. Normally, when a comet breaks apart, its brightness spikes sharply. Sunlight hits the newly exposed material, producing a burst of reflected light, then slowly fades as dust disperses. 3I/Atlas didn't behave that way. Its brightness increased before each recorded fragmentation event, anticipating its own disintegration. The flares came first, then the breakups, almost like signals marking a countdown. Some observers joked that it was announcing its own death. Others were too uneasy to laugh. Nothing like it had been recorded before. Astronomers began to map the pattern in more detail. When the light curve was translated into frequency data, it showed harmonics, overtones, like those found in music. The intervals weren't random. They followed ratios that corresponded to geometric symmetry. A signal analyst from MIT compared it to a repeating waveform and noted that if converted into sound, it would produce a tone that pulsed every 12 minutes. That number, 12, repeated across multiple datasets. 12 minutes between brightness peaks, 12 observed fragments, 12 degrees of deviation in the object's spin. Coincidence or design? To the naked eye, 3I/Atlas was beautiful, a glowing emerald streak against the night sky, its tail shimmering like a living aurora. But behind that beauty was chaos and precision interwoven. The fluctuations in its brightness were not the random flickers of melting ice, but deliberate, almost deliberate enough to seem intentional. The comet seemed to be communicating not with words, but with the universal language of light and rhythm. If an alien civilization wanted to announce its presence to anyone capable of watching, said Dr. Lillian Santos, an astrophysicist from the European Southern Observatory, this is exactly how they would do it, through behavior, not technology, through something that looks natural until you study it closely. Still, science demands caution. Alternative explanations circulated. Perhaps internal gas jets were venting periodically, creating cycles of increased reflectivity. Perhaps the brightness fluctuations were caused by dust grains of unusual composition, microscopic mirrors aligning under electromagnetic influence. But no one could explain the consistency, even after it broke apart. The fragments maintained synchronized brightening patterns, as if the rhythm had transferred from the original nucleus into its pieces. That, more than anything, terrified the researchers, because synchronization after fragmentation implies coordination, a behavior impossible for inanimate matter. The phenomenon caught the attention of SETI researchers who specialize in detecting patterns that could indicate intelligence. They ran spectral analyses to see if any specific frequencies within the brightness changes corresponded to known signal patterns, binary codes, Fibonacci sequences, harmonic series. What they found was chilling. Embedded within the seemingly random flickers was a repeating ratio, 1.618, the golden ratio. Not exact, but close enough to make every rational scientist pause. Nature produces that number often, from galaxies to seashells, but not in artificial light curves measured across millions of kilometers of space. It was too precise, too self-consistent. Either we're seeing the universe speak its own mathematics, said one researcher, or someone out there is speaking through it. By May 2020, the world had turned its eyes toward the pandemic, and the story of 3I/Atlas quietly faded from public news. But inside the observatories, it never stopped. Data continued to come in, subtle flashes recorded by satellites, faint echoes in the electromagnetic spectrum. Some astronomers privately admitted that the object's brightness pattern had continued even after it should have faded beyond detection. They called it the afterglow. Others compared it to a beacon still echoing long after its source had vanished. If true, it meant that something about 3I/Atlas remained active even in its death. Then came the rediscovery. Faint readings from instruments in 2025 showing the same rhythm in a different region of space, moving along the same galactic vector. The same brightness fluctuations, the same timing. It was as though the pattern itself had survived, detached from the physical object, traveling like a ghost of light through the void. NASA dismissed it as data noise, but independent researchers weren't convinced. We've seen that rhythm before, wrote astrophysicist Arjun Patel on a private forum. It's not noise, it's returning. If that's true, then 3I/Atlas might not be gone. Its brightness, its strange flickering signal, could have been more than a reflection. It could have been a transmission, a silent code encoded in photons, invisible to anyone who doesn't know how to listen. And if the pattern now reappears in the same direction, the implication is profound. It's cyclical, predictable, intentional. Maybe the light wasn't just shining. Maybe it was calling, because in a universe where everything moves according to law and chance, 3I/Atlas broke both. Its brightness didn't obey the physics of comets, it followed the logic of something trying to be seen. And now, with just hours left before the event scientists have warned about, that same pattern is beginning to pulse again, faint, rhythmic, steady. The sky above Earth flickers, and once more the question returns. Was 3I/Atlas a rock, a relic, or a message written in light? Whatever the answer, its glow still lingers in the night, as if waiting for someone to finally understand what it's trying to say. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when 3I/Atlas began to die. Most comets fade slowly, disintegrating under the relentless heat of the sun until only dust remains. But Atlas did something else entirely. It fractured suddenly, violently, and without any visible cause. One night, it was a brilliant green ghost streaking across the sky. The next, it was a cluster of broken lights, each fragment still glowing with a strange internal energy. Telescopes across the world caught the event in real time, and what they saw defied explanation. The comet didn't just fall apart, it shattered from within, as if something inside it had detonated. The first observation came from the asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, the same network that had discovered the object weeks earlier. On April 12, 2020, one of its telescopes registered a sudden spike in luminosity, followed by a sharp decline. Normally, that would suggest a large portion of the comet's ice had sublimated, releasing gas and dust. But this spike was too fast, too localized. Within hours, other observatories confirmed that Atlas had split into several large pieces, each one trailing its own faint tail. That wasn't unusual by itself. Comets break apart often. What was unusual was how the fragments moved. They didn't scatter randomly, as debris should. Instead, they maintained a consistent formation, drifting apart in perfect symmetry. Astronomers described it as graceful, a word rarely used in scientific reports. The spacing between the fragments remained nearly identical for days, and when plotted on a graph, their trajectories formed a geometric pattern, a spiral that tightened, then expanded, repeating with eerie precision. Debba. It's almost as if the pieces are talking to each other, said one researcher in disbelief, like they know where the others are. At first, scientists searched for a natural explanation. Could internal pressure have built up unevenly? Could the sun's radiation have hit a weak spot? But none of those theories fit. The internal temperature of the comet wasn't high enough to cause spontaneous explosion, and there was no evidence of external impact. The disintegration was too controlled, too deliberate. Every fragment seemed to follow an invisible plan. It was as if the object had been designed to break apart, to distribute itself in a particular pattern across space, a pattern that, when analyzed, revealed something far more disturbing. When researchers traced the path of each fragment backward, they found that the points of origin aligned almost perfectly along an axis that pointed toward the constellation Lyra, the same region of space that had already been linked to 3I/Atlas's incoming trajectory. That alignment was statistically impossible to be coincidental. It was as if the breakup had been orchestrated to preserve a directional vector, to keep pointing toward where it came from. Even after its death, the comet seemed to be signaling home. By mid-April, the scientific community was divided. Some insisted it was a purely physical phenomenon, a coincidence born of cosmic chaos. Others weren't so sure. The European Space Agency's data team ran models that showed the energy required for such a uniform disintegration exceeded what sunlight alone could produce. Something else had forced it apart, something from within. There were no signs of heat, impact, or gravitational stress, just a silent implosion, followed by fragments that refused to behave like rubble. Imagine breaking the glass, said one astrophysicist, and watching the shards float away in formation. Then came the strangest discovery of all. When the Hubble Space Telescope captured high-resolution images of the debris field, analysts noticed faint halos around each fragment. They pulsed in the same rhythm as the brightness fluctuations recorded before the breakup. Even in pieces, 3I/Atlas was still following the same beat, as if whatever had controlled its strange luminosity was still active inside its remains. The pattern was too complex to be noise. It looked like a system trying to maintain communication with itself. Around this time, rumors began to spread within the astronomy community. Leaked reports from private observatories claimed that radio telescopes had picked up unusual low-frequency emissions near the debris cloud. They weren't, if you were classic signals, no modulation, no encoded data, just faint, regular pulses that matched the rhythm of the light variations. Most institutions dismissed the claim as equipment interference, but others quietly recorded the same phenomenon. One internal memo from an American observatory described the data as consistent with structured energy release of non-natural origin. The memo was never made public. As weeks passed, the fragments drifted farther apart, yet their trajectories remained eerily stable. Normally, dust and ice fragments spread out and lose coherence within days. The fragments of 3I/Atlas, however, stayed in symmetrical formation for nearly 2 weeks before finally dispersing. When plotted in 3 dimensions, their paths formed a shape that defied random chance, a spiral fractal resembling a logarithmic curve, similar to patterns found in biological structures like shells and galaxies. The same golden ratio appeared again, embedded not in brightness this time, but in movement. For many, this was the breaking point between belief and denial. If this is natural, wrote one anonymous researcher in a leaked email, then nature is speaking in geometry. Others went further, suggesting the comet might not have been a solid object at all, but a vessel, something that had been designed to release fragments intentionally, perhaps to seed information across space. That idea was too radical for the mainstream, but it explained the data perfectly. 3I/Atlas wasn't destroyed by accident. It executed a sequence. Its disintegration wasn't its end. It was its function. Meanwhile, deep space radar systems continued to monitor the region. What they detected made things even stranger. For several nights after the breakup, faint reflections continued to echo from the original coordinates, echoes that shouldn't have been possible if the debris had moved on. It was as though something invisible remained, something that absorbed radar and emitted low-level electromagnetic noise. The readings faded after several days, leaving scientists with nothing but questions and corrupted data files. Some called it a glitch. Others wondered if it was deliberate interference. But perhaps the most unsettling part came from an analysis done months later. A group of data scientists compared the timing of the breakup to solar activity cycles and found a disturbing correlation. Just hours before the comet disintegrated, the sun emitted a minor coronal mass ejection, a burst of plasma and magnetic energy. It wasn't strong enough to reach the comet directly, but it was enough to change the electromagnetic field in that region of space. For reasons no one could explain, 3I/Atlas responded instantly, fracturing in harmony with the sun's pulse. The odds of such synchronization happening naturally were infinitesimal. It was almost like the comet reacted. If that's true, then 3I/Atlas wasn't a passive traveler. It was a listener, an object capable of responding to its environment, or at least programmed to react to certain cosmic events. Its disintegration could have been a trigger, an activation, a transformation. Maybe it wasn't breaking apart. Maybe it was dividing, reproducing, or awakening something within. Because what followed, days later, was even stranger. The faint rhythmic pulses detected in the debris field began to drift outward, forming a slow-moving wave that spread across interplanetary space. The same pulse detected again years later in 2025, exactly 72 hours before the predicted event. So perhaps the explosion of 3I/Atlas wasn't an accident, but a transmission, a final signal sent not to us, but to whatever waits in the dark beyond Lyra. And as its fragments continued to fade, the universe itself seemed to pause as if listening. The object was gone, its remnants scattered, yet its heartbeat, that flickering rhythm of light, still echoed faintly in the void. To most of humanity, the event passed unnoticed. But for those who watched, who measured, who recorded, one truth became impossible to deny. The comet hadn't died. It had spoken. For decades, astronomers believed that comets were among the simplest travelers of the cosmos, icy relics left over from the birth of solar systems, drifting silently for billions of years. But when 3I/Atlas began to reveal its inner nature, that belief collapsed. What lay inside this interstellar visitor didn't match anything known to science. Its composition, the very materials that made it, was an unsolved equation, a contradiction that refused to fit into the chemistry of nature. The first hint came when its reflected light was analyzed through spectroscopy. Scientists expected to find the usual suspects: frozen water, carbon dioxide, ammonia, a mixture of simple molecules that make up most comets. Instead, they found a chemical fingerprint that looked like it belonged to several different worlds at once. At first, the readings seemed impossible. Certain wavelengths showed the unmistakable presence of carbon rich compounds, the kind found in organic molecules, the basic building blocks of life. But others revealed metallic traces including nickel, chromium, and even titanium, which shouldn't have been there in such concentrations. Stranger still, the pattern of absorption lines hinted at something even more exotic: silicates with properties that didn't exist on any planet in our solar system. When NASA's infrared spectrometers rechecked the data, they detected traces of noble gases trapped within crystalline structures, like tiny cages of light, perfectly preserved for millions of years. It was as if the comet's core had been engineered to store something, not just to survive deep space, but to protect its contents from decay. The European Southern Observatory called the results anomalous but inconclusive. That was the official phrasing. Behind closed doors, the tone was different. "We are looking at something that shouldn't exist," said one scientist in a leaked email thread. The ratio of isotopes in its carbon compounds didn't match any known cosmic source. It wasn't from a supernova, a nebula, or a young star system. Its chemical balance was too deliberate, almost symmetrical. It was like finding a snowflake made of glass and metal, perfectly shaped, impossible to explain. "It's not alien technology," wrote another researcher, "but it's not random nature either." As the fragments of 3I/Atlas continued to travel outward, telescopes captured spectral shifts that revealed even more mysteries. Each piece seemed to contain slightly different materials, as though each one carried a specific sample from a different environment. One fragment glowed with frozen methane. Another emitted faint traces of phosphine gas, a compound sometimes associated with biological processes. But the strangest readings came from a small piece labeled Fragment D, which reflected light in an entirely new way. Its albedo, the measure of how much light it reflects, changed depending on the angle of observation, as if its surface was adaptive. Some compared it to metamaterials, substances designed to manipulate light in advanced optical technologies. Yet this was not a machine, at least not one that anyone could understand. When deep space radio telescopes scanned the fragments, they noticed something even more unsettling. The dust cloud around 3I/Atlas absorbed specific frequencies of radiation while reflecting others. It was selective, like a filter that chose what kind of energy to allow through. Natural materials don't do that. They scatter light in all directions, not according to hidden rules, but the cloud around Atlas behaved as if programmed, blocking certain wavelengths and enhancing others. The filtered frequencies corresponded to a narrow band around 1.42 gigahertz, the hydrogen line, often used in SETI research because it's considered a universal channel for intelligent communication. That discovery shook even the skeptics. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Using its frequency as a communication standard makes sense. If someone wants to be heard by anyone, anywhere, of course, no one dared to call it a signal. The data could have been coincidence, but coincidence has limits, and 3I/Atlas kept crossing them. The spectrographic readings also revealed something that made physicists uneasy: isotopic anomalies in its oxygen ratio. Oxygen normally comes in predictable forms, but Atlas contained an imbalance that matched neither Earth's, Mars's, nor any known interstellar gas clouds. The oxygen inside it seemed aged differently, as if it had experienced time at a different rate. That suggested extreme exposure to gravitational distortions or some kind of radiation shielding, conditions one might find only near the edge of a black hole or inside an artificial containment field. The implication was staggering. Either Atlas had passed through an environment no natural comet could survive, or it was designed to endure it. In May 2020, an internal meeting at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reportedly ended in silence after a presentation showed the elemental analysis. The distribution of heavy metals within the core fragments was not random. It followed a logarithmic pattern. The metals were layered, alternating between conductors and insulators, like a primitive circuit. When modeled digitally, this pattern produced a structure eerily similar to the layout of microcapacitors, devices used to store and release energy in electronics. Was it possible that 3I/Atlas wasn't just carrying matter, but information? A natural rock could never form such an ordered structure, yet there it was, written in the language of chemistry rather than code. As months passed, other institutions confirmed the findings. A paper quietly circulated between research groups proposed that the comet's materials might have been assembled in a region of extreme magnetic turbulence where plasma and metal could fuse under precise resonance frequencies. But no known stellar process could produce that pattern. To replicate it would require control at a level that blurred the line between physics and intention. It's like someone used the galaxy itself as a laboratory, said Dr. Devek Jin Morita of the Tokyo Astronomical Observatory, and 3I/Atlas is a sample that escaped. Adding to the mystery was its unusual thermal signature. As it approached the sun, the comet heated unevenly. Some regions glowed hotter than they should have, while others remained frozen solid. This asymmetry didn't align with sunlight exposure. Instead, it suggested internal regulation, as though the object could redistribute heat. Infrared readings captured localized temperature spikes that pulsed in sync with its brightness fluctuations. That was the same rhythm that had been detected since the beginning. To the scientists, it looked like the fragments were still communicating, transferring energy in coordinated bursts. Perhaps through electromagnetic induction, it's almost like watching a living organism regulate its temperature, one researcher whispered, except it's made of stone and ice. Every new discovery pushed the boundary between science and myth. If Atlas was natural, it was the most extraordinary natural formation ever recorded, one that defied every law of thermodynamics, radiation, and molecular behavior. If it wasn't natural, then humanity had stumbled upon something far beyond our comprehension, a technology built from materials that mimicked geology, a machine that pretended to be a rock. Either explanation was terrifying in its own way. Because if it was nature, then we had vastly underestimated what the universe could create. And if it wasn't, then someone, somewhere, had created it, and it had found us. Years later, in 2025, when new readings began to emerge from deep space sensors, scientists noticed a chilling detail. The same isotopic signature, the same chemical fingerprint, was detected again, faint but clear, in the direction where the original fragments had vanished. That shouldn't be possible. The dust should have dispersed long ago. But the data suggested that the same elements were reassembling slowly in the void, as if the pieces of 3I/Atlas were reforming themselves, rebuilding the pattern that once gave them shape. Some called it data error, others called it resurrection. Now, as the countdown reaches its final 72 hours, those same chemical fingerprints are once again detectable in the solar wind, whispering through the radiation streams like the ghost of a message repeated after light years of silence. No one knows what they mean. No one can explain how an object shattered into dust could still be reorganizing itself across space. But one thing is certain. Whatever 3I/Atlas was made of, it wasn't dead matter. Was something capable of remembering. Something that, even in pieces, still knows how to find its way home. From the beginning, there were whispers that 3I/Atlas might not be entirely natural. The shape of its trajectory, the synchronized breakup, the pulsing light, everything about it felt engineered. But it wasn't until scientists began comparing it to previous interstellar visitors that a new, more disturbing theory began to take form. What if it was built? What if Atlas wasn't a comet at all, but a machine disguised as one? The idea sounded absurd, almost heretical, yet the evidence piled up piece by piece, and soon the line between speculation and possibility began to blur. The first clue came when astronomers noticed that 3I/Atlas's behavior mirrored certain characteristics of Oumuamua, the first interstellar object ever detected. Both had hyperbolic orbits, Both accelerated in ways gravity couldn't explain, and both displayed unusual light reflections. But Atlas went further. It didn't just move. Oddly, it reacted. Its disintegration followed precise geometrical rules. Its fragments remained in structured formation, and its chemical makeup suggested artificial organization. If this was coincidence, it was the most intelligent coincidence the cosmos had ever produced. Some scientists began to whisper the unthinkable. Maybe 3I/Atlas was an artificial probe sent by an ancient civilization, not to communicate, but to observe. After all, sending a mechanical object disguised as a natural comet would be the perfect camouflage. It could drift unnoticed for eons, blending in with the background noise of space, until it encountered something interesting, like a young, noisy species suddenly lighting up the radio spectrum of a small blue planet. If that theory was correct, then 3I/Atlas wasn't the first to arrive. It was just the first we noticed. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb had already suggested that Oumuamua might have been a light sail, a thin artificial structure propelled by starlight. At the time, the idea was ridiculed, but when Atlas appeared, many of Loeb's critics grew quiet. It followed too many of the same anomalies: non gravitational acceleration, controlled rotation, impossible reflectivity, and where Oumuamua had vanished before detailed study, Atlas stayed long enough to reveal its secrets. Some began calling it the second visitor. Others began to wonder if it was the same object, returned under a new form. In private meetings, researchers discussed the possibility that 3I/Atlas could be part of a network, probes designed to gather information and transmit it across interstellar distances. They pointed to the recurring pulses in its brightness, which behaved more like a signal than a reflection. If this was true, then its apparent disintegration might have been a method of data transmission, the release of encoded dust, each particle carrying microscopic information. The pattern of its fragments even resembled the dispersion algorithms used in digital communications, where information is divided into small pieces that can later be reassembled. What looked like death could have been an upload. Of course, no one dared to publish that theory openly. The scientific community doesn't take well to the word artificial. Yet quietly, the data kept confirming what no one wanted to admit: the metallic traces, the symmetry, the strange heat regulation. They didn't belong to any natural cometary model. 3I/Atlas didn't behave like a chunk of rock and ice. It behaved like something built for endurance, adaptation, and observation. It absorbed energy, adjusted its brightness, and responded to cosmic events like solar flares. To some, it looked like a machine with instinct or memory. Even the timing of its appearance seemed suspicious. It entered our solar system in 2020, the year humanity's electronic activity peaked during global lockdowns. Our planet became louder than ever in radio, radar, and satellite emissions. To a distant observer, it would have been like a flare in the void, a sudden spike of artificial noise from a small world. And soon after, Atlas appeared. Was it coincidence, or had something been listening for that signal, waiting for proof of technological life before sending its next scout? Some scientists proposed that if an advanced civilization wanted to explore the galaxy efficiently, it wouldn't send biological beings. It would send autonomous probes, self-replicating machines capable of building copies of themselves from the matter they encounter. These theoretical devices, known as von Neumann probes, could travel indefinitely, spreading information across the stars. If even one civilization had created such machines millions of years ago, the galaxy could already be filled with them, disguised as asteroids, comets, or interstellar debris. Perhaps 3I/Atlas was one of them, an ancient explorer passing silently through our neighborhood, gathering data on every electromagnetic signature it found. The unsettling part of this theory wasn't that it existed, but how well 3I/Atlas fit it. The object's internal structure, layers of metals and insulators arranged in fractal patterns, resembled data storage architecture on a cosmic scale. Its reflective properties shifted dynamically, as if optimizing for solar radiation or communication efficiency. And its final act, the self destruction, looked eerily similar to what engineers would call a controlled release, a system decomposing by design to scatter its payload. Some fragments even decayed at different rates, as though programmed with varying lifespans, spreading across different orbital regions to maximize coverage. To an alien engineer, that would make perfect sense. To us, it looked like mystery. But perhaps the most haunting discovery came later. When scientists traced the direction of the debris expansion, they found that it wasn't random. The fragments had dispersed in a cone pointing back toward the outer solar system, more specifically, toward interstellar space. If the comet had been transmitting information, that's the direction it would have sent it. Some observatories reported faint, low frequency signals following the same path weeks after the breakup, like the echoes of a completed transmission. And if that's true, then whatever Atlas was doing here, it had already finished. Its message was sent. To whom or what, no one knows. Years later, a new anomaly was detected, a faint electromagnetic signature reappearing near the same coordinates, synchronized with the same 12-minute pulse first recorded in 2020. That's what triggered the current countdown, the 72-hour window before the predicted event. If Atlas was a probe, then the pulse could mean one of two things. Either it's returning to retrieve what it left behind, or something else is responding to its call. Imagine that 3i/Atlas was built billions of years ago, a seed launched from a dying world, traveling across interstellar space in search of civilizations. It doesn't need to think, feel, or decide. It simply operates, repeating a mission written in its very atoms. When it reaches a system with intelligent life, it activates, collects data, and signals home. To us, it looks like a comet that breaks apart. To its creators, it's a message completed, and maybe now, after countless years of silence, that message has been received. In that case, what happens next is no longer a matter of astronomy, but of history. Because if 3i/Atlas was artificial, even if it was built by a civilization long gone, it means we're not the first to reach across the stars. It means someone else has already done it, long before we even learned to look up. And maybe, just maybe, they finally realized we're here. Now, as telescopes point once more toward the coordinates where it all began, a faint rhythm emerges from the darkness, the same pulse that preceded the disintegration 5 years ago. Every 12 minutes, the universe blinks, not loudly, not violently, but softly, like a whisper returning from the edge of time. And in that whisper lies the possibility that 3i/Atlas was never gone, never dead, never lost. It might have been waiting for an answer. When 3i/Atlas first appeared, comparisons to Oumuamua were inevitable. Humanity had already seen an interstellar visitor once before, and that memory was still fresh. A strange, cigar-shaped object that flashed through our solar system in 2017, accelerated without explanation, and vanished before we could truly understand it. Astronomers called it a relic of another world, but some suspected something far stranger, that it might have been a probe, a messenger from an ancient civilization. When 3i/Atlas entered the stage, the parallels were impossible to ignore. It behaved like a sequel written by the universe itself. Same mystery, same defiance of physics, but this time it stayed long enough to reveal what Oumuamua never could. The two objects were separated by only a few years, but in cosmic terms, that's like lightning striking twice in the same place. Statistically, humanity should have waited centuries to detect another interstellar traveler. Instead, Atlas appeared as if summoned, a mirror of the first. Both shared hyperbolic trajectories, paths that proved they didn't belong to our sun. Both accelerated without visible propulsion, and both displayed irregular light signatures, as though their surfaces were polished or metallic. But Atlas differed in one crucial way. It broke apart. Oumuamua remained whole and silent, a phantom passing through. Atlas, on the other hand, fractured, loudly, deliberately, and some argued communicatively. When data from both objects were analyzed side by side, unsettling coincidences began to appear. Their entry angles into the solar system were not random. Both came from roughly the same galactic direction, near the constellation Lyra. the same region tied to the WOW signal decades ago. The odds of two unrelated interstellar bodies entering from the same region were astronomically small. Either we were witnessing an incredible coincidence or both were part of a larger pattern. Some speculated that 3I/Atlas might have been a follow-up, a second scout sent to observe how Earth had reacted to the first. If Oumuamua was the question, then Atlas might have been the answer. But what kind of intelligence could send such messengers? And more importantly, what could they possibly want? Theorists proposed many explanations. One idea was that both objects were data probes, relics from a civilization that had long vanished, still carrying out their mission automatically. Another, more haunting, suggested that they were not probes at all, but beacons, repeating the same motion and light signature across space as a signal to anyone watching. To us, they look like random comets. To those who understand the code, they might say something far more profound. Perhaps they are not looking for a response. Perhaps they are waiting for recognition. When the compositional data of Atlas was compared to the limited spectral readings of Oumuamua, another pattern emerged. Both showed signs of materials that resisted classification, metals and silicates arranged in ways inconsistent with natural formation. In particular, both displayed reflectivity inconsistent with ice or rock. Some surfaces behaved almost like engineered alloys, smooth, uniform, capable of reflecting light more efficiently than any known cometary material. For Oumuamua, this led to the light sail theory that it might have been propelled by radiation pressure, like a fragment of a solar-powered craft. Atlas took that theory and pushed it further. Its fragments didn't just reflect sunlight, they modulated it, changing intensity in a rhythmic pattern. It was as if the two objects were part of the same design language, separated by time but connected by origin. The similarities grew even stranger when their brightness curves were aligned. The intervals between their major luminosity peaks followed an almost identical mathematical ratio. Both followed a 12-minute harmonic, a timing pattern that should have been meaningless, yet repeated across both objects years apart. It was as though one voice had spoken twice, in the same rhythm, from two different mouths. That realization shook even the most skeptical astronomers. The universe doesn't repeat itself with this kind of precision, said Dr. Anjali Kaur from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. Something, or someone, does. Theories began to merge into something larger. Perhaps Oumuamua and 3I/Atlas were pieces of the same event. One hypothesis suggested they were fragments of a single, colossal structure scattered across interstellar space millions of years ago, each following a trajectory that occasionally intersected with inhabited systems. If true, then these weren't visitors. They were remnants of a message, parts of a cosmic artifact slowly drifting back together over unimaginable distances. Some even speculated that their combined trajectories formed a pattern, a geometric alignment on a galactic scale. When their paths were projected backward, they converged near a single point in deep space, a region astronomers call the Vega Corridor, not far from Lyra. And in 2025, the strange signals being detected, again, were coming from the same direction. To understand what that means, imagine dropping two bottles into the ocean centuries apart, from the same shore, both carrying fragments of the same letter. One washes up in 2017, the other in 2020. Different bottles, same handwriting. And now in 2025, the ocean sends another ripple, a wave that suggests a third is on the way. That's how scientists began to see 3I/Atlas not as an isolated mystery, but as part of a sequence, a chain of interstellar breadcrumbs leading somewhere. The idea was too large, too profound to accept publicly, but privately, many had already drawn the conclusion. We are not observing coincidences. We are witnessing continuity. In one confidential SETI conference, a researcher presented what she called the dual probe hypothesis. Her argument was simple yet terrifying. Oumuamua was a passive scout, designed to gather electromagnetic data from nearby star systems. Atlas, however, was an active probe, one capable of transmission. Its breakup, she claimed, was not destruction, but activation. The synchronized fragments acted like a phased array, converting sunlight into a distributed signal. The fact that the event coincided with Earth's increased digital noise, satellites, internet traffic, radio emissions might not have been accidental. It came when we became loud, she said. It left when it had what it came for. That theory would have remained forgotten if not for what happened 5 years later. In early 2025, radio telescopes in Chile and Australia began picking up faint, repeating signals at 1.42 gigahertz, the same hydrogen frequency associated with both objects. The timing of the pulses matched the same 12-minute rhythm, but the signal didn't originate from deep space. It came from within the solar system, from the outer edge, the direction 3I/Atlas's fragments were last seen heading. At first, it was thought to be interference, but the pattern persisted, growing stronger as days passed. And then something chilling happened. The frequency shifted slightly, as if tuning itself toward us. That's what started the countdown, 72 hours to the predicted moment when the signal would reach maximum amplitude. No one knows what will happen when it does. Some say it's just natural resonance, a meaningless echo of the past. Others believe it's a return call, a response triggered by our own transmissions. The parallels with Oumuamua make that idea hard to dismiss. Maybe both objects were part of a network, and Atlas was the node assigned to our star. Maybe it completed its mission 5 years ago, sent its message home, and now something out there is answering. What connects 3I/Atlas and Oumuamua might not be their shape, speed, or brightness, but their purpose. Both arrived quietly, observed us without interaction, and left traces, not of presence, but of intention. They came from the same direction, behaved under the same impossible physics, and echoed the same rhythm of light. Whether they were relics or messengers, one thing is certain: they were not accidents. And as the pulse returns once again stronger than before, a question now hangs over every telescope, every antenna, every restless mind that looks to the sky. What if these objects were never meant to communicate with us at all, but with each other? And what if, this time, the conversation has just begun? For most of human history, the question of alien life lived comfortably in the realm of speculation, a mystery reserved for philosophers and dreamers. Scientists approached it cautiously, balancing curiosity with skepticism. But when 3I/Atlas appeared, the conversation changed. It wasn't a question of whether life might exist elsewhere, but whether something beyond life, something constructed, deliberate, ancient, was already watching. For years, the idea of alien probes had been dismissed as pseudoscience. Yet now, with two interstellar visitors in less than a decade, both displaying impossible trajectories and unexplained accelerations, the idea began to sound less like fantasy and more like overdue logic. If humanity could send spacecraft beyond its own solar system, why couldn't someone else have done it long before us? The theory first gained traction quietly, whispered through encrypted channels between observatories. Could 3I/Atlas be artificial? Read one leaked email from the European Space Agency. If so, what was its mission? The object's behavior seemed to mock the very definition of randomness. It wasn't just its orbit or its brightness, it was the consistency of its anomalies. Its acceleration matched no natural pattern. Its fragments moved in coordination, as if maintaining communication. And its light pulse, that haunting 12-minute rhythm, persisted even after disintegration. To many, that was the final straw. Nature can produce chaos, but not coherence that repeats across years, objects, and distances. Soon, the artificial origin hypothesis took shape. It proposed that 3I/Atlas wasn't a comet or asteroid at all, but a probe, a device designed to gather information, store it, and transmit it across interstellar distances. Its resemblance to a comet would be intentional. A PWP. Disguise. The perfect camouflage. Space is full of icy rocks. No one would notice one more. A probe like that could drift silently for millennia, powered by light, gravity, or technology beyond our comprehension. And if its creators wanted to remain unseen, they couldn't have chosen a better form. Humanity only recognized it because of its glow, the one clue that perhaps, just perhaps, it wanted to be noticed. Of course, the mainstream scientific community rejected the idea. The word alien carries weight that no institution wants to bear. Funding agencies, universities, and governments all avoid it, not because it's impossible, but because it's uncontrollable. To admit such a thing would shatter not just scientific models, but entire worldviews. Yet behind closed doors, the unease grew. As more data emerged, the coincidences piled up too perfectly. The trajectory from Lyra, the geometric fragmentation, the synchronization of light, these weren't chaotic accidents. They were fingerprints of something deliberate. Every time a new dataset was released, the question returned, how many coincidences does it take before we call it design? One astrophysicist compared it to finding a seashell in the desert. Maybe it's a coincidence, but when you find two and both hum the same tune, coincidence starts to sound like denial. Some began calling it the Oumuamua Atlas system, suggesting both belong to a network of ancient devices seeded through space long ago. Perhaps millions of years ago, a civilization scattered these objects like breadcrumbs, each one designed to collect and transmit data from different regions of the galaxy. Most would go unnoticed, but when one passed near a star with intelligent life, it would awaken, react to electromagnetic noise, light, or other technological signatures. And once its mission was complete, it would send its findings home. That theory explained everything: the sudden acceleration, the rhythmic pulses, even the disintegration, which could have been the mechanism for transmission. But if Atlas was a probe, then who built it? And where were they now? Some theorists speculated that its creators might not even exist anymore, that they had sent these devices millions of years ago, knowing they would outlast their civilization. Others thought the opposite, that the network was still active, constantly monitoring, perhaps even expanding. The thought was terrifying, not because it implied we weren't alone, but because it suggested we'd already been found. We might not be the observers, wrote one researcher. We might be the observed. A particularly controversial paper, circulated in secret forums, proposed that Atlas's behavior might represent an experiment, not of communication, but of reaction. What if it wasn't designed to talk, but to see how we would respond, to study not our physics, but our psychology? After all, the true test of intelligence isn't whether a species can receive a message, but how it interprets the unknown. The sudden appearance of interstellar objects, the way our global scientific community reacts, debates, fears, and dismisses, all of that is information. Information that could be observed from afar. If we were studying a newly discovered civilization, the paper read, we'd do the same. We'd drop something strange into their sky and watch what they do. Even more unsettling were the implications of the new data arriving in 2025. Radio telescopes detected faint, regular bursts of energy coming from the same region where Atlas's fragments disappeared. The signal grew stronger as it approached a repeating interval, the same 12-minute cycle, the same heartbeat. It didn't carry any obvious modulation, no encoded message, no data. Just rhythm, but rhythm itself is a form of information. It says something is there, something that repeats, something that knows how to. Announcement sent shockwaves through the scientific world. Suddenly, the impossible had become measurable again. The event wasn't over, it was continuing. At the SETI Institute, a team of analysts ran the signal through deep learning filters. What they found made them stop breathing for a moment. The waveform wasn't purely sinusoidal, it carried harmonics, layers of frequencies stacked in mathematical ratios consistent with purposeful design. When converted into sound, it resembled a tone that crescendoed every 12 minutes and then reset, like a beacon breathing in the dark. It was faint, almost ghostly, but unmistakably intentional. That was the moment when even skeptics fell silent, because now the same 12-minute signature that defined Atlas's brightness and motion was echoing through space once more, stronger than before, as if the source had awoken. Governments tried to suppress the findings, releasing statements about instrumental noise and natural oscillations, but the data leaked anyway. The world learned that something was broadcasting from the same coordinates where the fragments had vanished, something repeating the same ancient rhythm. And as the 72-hour countdown began, the mystery deepened further. The source wasn't moving away anymore. It was slowing down, decelerating, as if approaching. If Atlas was a probe, it may not have been alone. The signal might not be its echo. It might be an arrival, a reply, a continuation of a conversation that began 5 years ago when the first pulse reached out from the void. Some scientists still cling to natural explanations: an asteroid, a magnetar, a pulsar. But pulsars don't slow down. Magnetars don't repeat with that precision, and asteroids don't return from the dead. Whatever is coming now, it's coming deliberately. So, as telescopes across the planet turn toward the silent coordinates, humanity stands at the edge of an answer it might not be ready for. If 3I/Atlas was artificial, then its creators are watching. And if they're not watching, then something else, something older, quieter, and more patient, has inherited their work. Either way, the message is clear. The universe is not empty, it remembers. And sometimes, when the timing is right, it speaks back. From the very beginning, something about the data didn't add up. Every time scientists tried to model 3I/Atlas, the numbers refused to behave. Its brightness fluctuated with an intelligence of its own. Its fragments moved in patterns that mocked physics, and its chemical fingerprint seemed crafted rather than born. But among all the anomalies, one detail stood out: the signals, faint, inconsistent, easily dismissed by skeptics, yet hauntingly deliberate. Buried inside the raw telescope data were fragments of information that didn't belong there. Strange frequencies, unexplained alignments, repeating sequences that felt more like intention than coincidence. And when researchers finally compared them side by side, they realized that the noise wasn't random. It was speaking, not in words, but in pattern. The first to notice was a young astrophysicist at the Atacama Large Millimeter Array named Eliana Torres. While reviewing the data for spectral analysis, she found a recurring pulse hidden inside the background radiation around 3I/Atlas's fragments. It wasn't strong enough to be a transmission, but it wasn't natural either. Every 12 minutes, the same mysterious interval that had defined the comet's brightness and motion, a faint electromagnetic fluctuation would ripple through the surrounding space. At first, she thought it was interference, maybe equipment noise. But when the same pattern appeared across multiple instruments at observatories separated by continents, the truth became undeniable. The signal was real, and it was repeating everywhere 3I/Atlas had been. The data confused everyone. It wasn't radio. It wasn't light. It was something in between, a low-frequency energy pulse that modulated across several wavelengths simultaneously, like a whisper carried through multiple channels at once. Its amplitude was too weak to be artificial noise, but its timing was too precise to be natural. It's not communication as we know it, Eliana wrote in her notes. It's resonance, something designed to be felt, not heard. That phrase, felt, not heard, became a rallying point for the growing number of scientists who believed 3I/Atlas wasn't done with us yet, because even in death, it was still talking. When the data was converted into visual form, the signal revealed an eerie symmetry. Every 12-minute pulse contained smaller subpulses arranged in a logarithmic spiral, matching the geometric ratios found in the distribution of its fragments. The same golden ratio that appeared in its light curve and chemical layering now reappeared in the signal structure. The pattern repeated itself across frequencies, scaling perfectly whether analyzed at low radio waves or infrared. It was self-similar, fractal. "It's the same architecture," said Dr. Malik Sayed from Caltech. "The object, its light, its trajectory, its decay, everything about it is a single repeating design. It's like someone left us a fingerprint the size of a solar system." Skeptics argued that the pattern was simply an artifact of human interpretation, but the deeper the scientists dug, the more the data resisted dismissal. One breakthrough came when a team in Finland converted the frequency intervals into audible sound. What emerged was not noise, but tone, a low, rhythmic hum that shifted subtly over time, like a heartbeat mixed with static. When sped up 1,000 times, it resembled language, not human, not structured, but undeniably intentional. The tones rose and fell with mathematical precision, forming sequences that repeated after each 12-minute cycle. It was as if the universe itself were breathing in code. As more observatories joined in, the signal became impossible to ignore. It followed the same vector 3I/Atlas had traveled, extending far beyond where the fragments should have dispersed. Some described it as an afterglow, others as a trail of memory. But then something strange began to happen. The signal started changing. Its pulse, once steady and predictable, began to shift slightly, adjusting frequency, shortening its period by fractions of a second, as though responding to observation. The more we studied it, the more it evolved, adapting to our instruments, bending itself toward detectability. It's like it knows it's being watched, said Eliana during a live interview that was later pulled from broadcast. It's learning. The implications were staggering. If true, it meant 3I/Atlas wasn't just a relic or a dead machine, it was something dynamic, capable of interaction, perhaps even self correction. SETI researchers began running cross correlations with human radio transmissions, and what they found chilled them. Faint harmonics in the signal seemed to align with global broadcasting frequencies. When Earth's satellites sent out standard data bursts, the pulses from 3I/Atlas's path adjusted milliseconds later, almost as if echoing back. The timing was too consistent to be coincidence. Was mimicking us, listening, learning, and then replying, subtly, quietly, as if trying not to scare its observers. Governments quickly classified the findings, citing national security concerns. But scientists, as they always do, found ways to share what they knew. Anonymous files appeared on encrypted forums, spectrograms of the pulses, time coded readings, even decoded audio versions of the hum. The public called it the Atlas Echo. Conspiracy channels claimed it was proof of alien contact, but those who understood the math saw something far more chilling. When the waveform was plotted in 3D space, it formed a spiral that converged toward a single point, coordinates within our own solar system. The pulses weren't coming from deep space anymore. They were coming from here. The discovery caused panic among researchers. The pulse source seemed to be moving closer, slowing down as it entered the plane of the solar system, the same maneuver that had defied gravity 5 years earlier. Satellites began to register faint electromagnetic fluctuations near the asteroid belt, and some instruments picked up microscopic particles consistent with 3I/Atlas's original composition. It was as if the fragments were reassembling, reforming into something cohesive again. If the pulses were guiding them, they were doing so with impossible precision. It's reforming itself, said one scientist under condition of anonymity. The data points align perfectly. Whatever Atlas was, it's trying to come back together. But what disturbed researchers most wasn't the motion, it was the message hidden within. As more advanced algorithms analyzed the signal, they discovered that the pulse intervals weren't just rhythm. They contained structured ratios, mathematical constants buried inside, like instructions written in the fabric of energy itself. Pi, E, and the golden ratio appeared in sequence, woven into the pulse timing. Then, near the end of the sequence, something new appeared, a set of three repeating values corresponding to the spatial coordinates of Earth relative to the Sun at that exact moment in time. It wasn't random. It was targeted. To some, that meant 3I/Atlas wasn't just a messenger. It was a mirror. It had observed, recorded, and now finally responded. Others feared something worse, that it was signaling its origin, calling for retrieval. The final piece of evidence came from a team in South Africa who recorded a faint modulation within the hum, an almost inaudible resonance that, when enhanced, sounded like a whisper of language. One phrase repeated again and again, a rising tone followed by two descending notes, and there's no resonance of display but the sense of display. To the human ear, it resembled three syllables, spoken slowly, almost like breath. Analysts described it as hauntingly deliberate. Linguists compared it to nothing known. The pattern defied translation, yet it carried rhythm, emphasis, as if saying something with purpose. Some listeners claimed it sounded like a name. Now, with less than 72 hours before the predicted event, the hum continues to strengthen. Its source is triangulated between Mars and Jupiter, exactly along the trajectory Atlas followed before it fragmented. No spacecraft or debris should be there, and yet the signal grows clearer with every passing hour. Radio telescopes across the planet hum in unison as the pulse synchronizes perfectly with Earth's rotation, as though aligning itself to us. Whether it's a countdown, a call, or a return, no one can say. But as the data streams in, one truth becomes unavoidable. 3i/Atlas may not be an object at all, it may be an intelligence. And now, after 5 years of silence, it has decided to speak. For weeks, the scientific world has been living in quiet hysteria. Every night, telescopes capture the same rhythm, the hum, the pulse, the unmistakable 12-minute beat that first defined 3i/Atlas. It is no longer a theory, no longer a fringe obsession. The signal is real and it is moving. Across observatories, instruments confirm what governments have refused to say aloud. Something out there is approaching. Not a meteor, not debris, not a satellite. Something following the same trajectory that 3i/Atlas once took. It's faint, deliberate, and accelerating. And if the projections are correct, it will reach its closest point to Earth in less than 72 hours. The race to understand has begun, and time is running out. Inside underground research facilities, scientists gather behind locked doors, reviewing terabytes of data in silence. The pattern hasn't stopped. The pulses have grown stronger, their frequency tightening slightly every day, as if synchronizing to Earth's rotation. It's as if the signal is locking on. The coordination between observatories is unprecedented. NASA, ESA, and private space companies have all turned their instruments toward the same coordinates, yet none dare release official statements. Only leaked footage, grainy and distorted, shows what they've found. A faint moving light far beyond the orbit of Mars, reflecting sunlight like a rotating mirror. At first glance, it looks like a comet's fragment, but when magnified, it blinks in a rhythm too precise to be chance, 12 minutes every time. On the surface, the world continues as if nothing is happening. But behind the scenes, humanity's most powerful institutions are preparing for something they don't understand. Governments issue quiet alerts to their military agencies. Communication satellites are rerouted. Observatories go offline for maintenance. In Geneva, an emergency session of the United Nations is held under the title Celestial Anomalies and Planetary Preparedness. No public broadcast, no press, only a handful of scientists, diplomats, and intelligence officials sitting under fluorescent light, watching a slow red dot on a screen. The data is simple. It's getting closer. The signal intensity doubles every 8 hours. Its modulation is consistent with non-random encoding. It's not noise, it's intention. No one agrees on what that intention is. Some believe it's a probe returning for retrieval, that whatever sent 3i/Atlas 5 years ago is now collecting its offspring. Others fear it's a second visitor, responding to the signal we accidentally triggered, and a few whisper something darker, that this is the next phase of a process already underway. According to leaked reports from SETI, the rhythm in the signal has begun to merge with Earth's electromagnetic field. Very faintly, imperceptibly, our own planet is beginning to echo it back. Radio systems in low orbit have reported synchronized distortions every 12 minutes. Some regions even experience microfluctuations in atmospheric ionization, a global heartbeat that wasn't there before. As the data grows stranger, so does the silence around it. News networks dismiss it as deep space interference. Space agencies deflect every question, but the leaks continue. Amateur astronomers have begun to notice the pattern themselves. The faint blink visible at the same intervals, even through small telescopes. Forums buzz with speculation. Is it returning? Is it alive, or is it calling something else? One chilling theory gains traction online. That 3i/Atlas was never a single object, but a network. That what we're seeing now is another node activating, following a pattern older than civilization itself. If true, then this isn't a message, it's a system coming online. In observatories across the world, researchers describe a feeling that borders on fear. The numbers make no sense. The acceleration is gentle but perfectly measured, increasing by the same rate every cycle as if following a script. When they project the path forward, the object will pass directly through the orbital plane of Earth, not collide, pass through. A perfect alignment, statistically impossible. And yet, the models hold. As the countdown continues, instruments begin detecting strange harmonics hidden inside the signal, deep subfrequencies that seem to form recognizable ratios like musical chords. It's not just a pulse anymore, says Dr. Kaito Moriyama from Kyoto. It's changing, it's singing. In one leaked audio recording from a Chilean observatory, the signal has been sped up 100-fold to make it audible. What emerges is terrifyingly beautiful, a rising sequence of tones repeating like a call and response, a pattern of 12, followed by one prolonged note. 12, 1, 12. Some researchers think it represents the solar system, 12 planets, including dwarf bodies, one star. Others think it's counting time. The most unnerving interpretation, however, is that it's calling not broadcasting outward, but listening inward, waiting for something on Earth to answer. Strange phenomena begin to appear around the globe. Magnetometers record periodic disturbances in perfect synchronization with the pulse. Birds migrate off-season. Compasses spin. Deep-sea hydrophones detect faint, matching vibrations beneath the oceans. No one can explain it. Scientists describe it as resonance, the universe's version of feedback. The signal isn't just reaching Earth anymore. Earth is responding involuntarily, like a tuning fork struck by a distant note. Whatever is approaching, it's no longer just a visitor in space. It's interacting with our planet at a fundamental level, and it's doing it with precision. Inside the European Space Agency, the mood has shifted from fascination to dread. Engineers attempt to triangulate the source more accurately, but every calculation returns the same impossibility. The signal's apparent origin is not a single point. It's a distributed pattern stretching across millions of kilometers, as though space itself were vibrating. One researcher compares it to an invisible web tightening. Another calls it a hand closing. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem bound by distance. It acts as if the entire solar system is part of its mechanism. And then, as the 72-hour mark approaches, the pulse changes again. For the first time in 5 years, the rhythm breaks. The 12-minute cycle collapses into 6. The hum deepens, growing denser, almost physical. Instruments begin to pick up a faint electromagnetic glow surrounding Earth, invisible to the eye, but real. It's here, whispers a technician in the control room of an observatory in Hawaii, staring at a monitor as static rolls across the screen. Whatever it is, it's here. Outside, the night sky looks unchanged, stars scattered across black silence, but every receiver, every antenna, every listening ear in the world knows the truth. The universe is no longer quiet. The thing we thought was distant, the signal we thought we were only observing, is now observing us back. The pulse has synchronized perfectly with Earth's magnetic field. Every 12 minutes, the planet itself trembles softly, rhythmically, as though something enormous and unseen has taken hold. No one can explain it. No one can stop it. And as the hum deepens, stretching through the oceans, the crust, and the air itself, a final, chilling realization dawns on those who understand the math. This was never about communication. It was preparation. The countdown is not to an arrival. It's to an awakening. Whatever 3i/Atlas was, It wasn't just a messenger, it was a key, and in less than 72 hours, the lock it fits will open. By now, the world has stopped pretending nothing is happening. The began as a faint whisper from the stars has become an undeniable rhythm, resonating across continents. Every 12 minutes, instruments spike, clocks drift, power grids flicker in sync. Dr. Robs, birds lift from trees seconds before each pulse, as if feeling it before it arrives. The public doesn't need official confirmation anymore. They can hear it faintly through the static of radios, the deep vibration beneath the earth, even in the hum of the air itself. Something enormous, unseen, and intelligent has reached across the void and made itself known. The age of silent skies is over. The observatories call it resonance coupling, but those words can't capture what's unfolding. Every signal from the direction of 3I/Atlas has synchronized perfectly with the planet's magnetic field. Satellites orbiting Earth now report oscillations in their instruments, as if an invisible tide were passing through space, rippling reality in measured waves. Data from solar monitors reveal that the sun's corona is pulsing too, faintly but unmistakably, echoing the same rhythm. The pattern is no longer local, it's systemic. It's as though the entire solar system has been tuned to a single frequency, one that didn't exist before the arrival of 3I/Atlas. At the Deep Space Network facility in Canberra, engineers make a terrifying discovery. When the pulse is inverted, the waveform doesn't vanish into noise, it resolves into structure. Layer after layer of interference reveals geometric precision. Nested spirals, repeating sequences, golden ratios stacked upon themselves like blueprints. It's not a signal, says Dr. Lena Havel from the European Space Operations Center. It's an operating system. The pulse, it turns out, isn't just broadcasting, it's instructing. Data analysis suggests that it's embedding information directly into magnetic fields, rewriting the natural resonance of matter itself. In other words, the signal is teaching the planet how to vibrate differently. Governments scramble. Military frequencies go dark. Emergency satellites are reoriented toward the incoming vector, but what they detect only deepens the fear. The object, if it can still be called that, is no longer just approaching. It's everywhere. Its fragments, once believed to be drifting debris, have reorganized into a vast, diffuse cloud surrounding Earth's orbital path, invisible to the naked eye, but luminous in radar and radio reflection. The cloud forms a perfect shell, rotating slowly in unison, like machinery made of dust. It's the same spiral pattern recorded when 3I/Atlas first broke apart. Only now the spiral encloses the planet, and then, as if obeying a hidden command, the pulses begin to change. They accelerate, 12 minutes, 10, then 9, until the rhythm becomes nearly constant. The frequency modulates, folding upon itself, layering harmonics that transform into what sound engineers describe as organized interference. Every node of the cloud begins to shimmer with faint electromagnetic emissions, synchronized to each other. What was once debris has become a network, a structure, a global machine powered by resonance and light. In the world's control centers, panic meets disbelief. Nothing like this has ever been recorded, not in astrophysics, not in radio science, not in any field. It's building coherence, says an analyst in Houston, like a system linking its components. And then someone asks the question everyone's been avoiding, linking to what? There's silence. The answer, unspoken but understood, is us. For hours, supercomputers analyze the pattern in the pulse. Finally, a chilling conclusion emerges. The waveform isn't random modulation, it mirrors the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic frequency of Earth's atmosphere. That means the signal is now fully synchronized with the planet itself, using the Earth as an antenna. Every oscillation, every hum, every heartbeat of the signal is now echoing through the crust, the oceans, and the human nervous system. People begin reporting strange sensations: pressure in the ears, static at the edge of perception, dreams filled with patterns of light and sound. Hospitals note an increase in synchronized cardiac arrhythmias occurring at 12-minute intervals. The planet's biology is responding, whether we understand it or not. At the same time, the object's trajectory does something that defies all models. It slows to a near stop relative to Earth, hovering at a stable distance beyond lunar orbit. That shouldn't be possible. No known propulsion, no gravitational mechanics could explain it. Yet it remains there, motionless against the background of stars, pulsing like a living heart. It's waiting, whispers Eliana Torres, the first scientist who discovered the signal years ago. It's waiting for alignment. And alignment is exactly what happens next. As Earth rotates, the pulse shifts, locking to specific longitudes. Cities begin to glow faintly in infrared imagery, not from heat, but from energy excitation in the ionosphere above them. The pattern forms lines that connect across continents, tracing a geometric grid that matches no human infrastructure, no ancient architecture, no magnetic anomaly. It's something else, a map, a circuit. One by one, observatories confirm it. The grid corresponds to the locations of ancient impact craters and magnetic anomalies, scars left by celestial events across millennia. It's as if 3I/Atlas is activating coordinates written into Earth's geological memory. Some historians speculate wildly that these could be remnants of previous encounters, older than recorded civilization. Others simply call it what it appears to be, a system coming online. Then, at precisely 2312 UTC, the signal shifts one final time. The 12-minute interval collapses into continuous communications transmission. The hum becomes a tone. Every receiver on the planet, from military arrays to handheld radios, captures the same thing, a sound unlike anything heard before, low, resonant, and impossibly pure, a note that feels alive. The power grid across Europe flickers. The skies over the Pacific shimmer with auroras and colors not found in nature. And for a single instant, every compass needle on Earth turns to face the same direction, toward the coordinates of the original 3I/Atlas trajectory. That's when the message arrives. It's not in words, not in data, but in emotion, a pulse felt through the nervous system of a planet now vibrating in harmony with something far older than itself. For some, it brings awe, for others, dread. In laboratories, in bedrooms, in deserts and city streets, millions feel it at once. The overwhelming awareness of something vast and watching. It's not hostile. It's not kind. It's simply present, a consciousness measured not in thoughts, but in frequency. Humanity, for the first time, understands what it means to be noticed. And then, just as suddenly, the pulse stops. Silence. Instruments go dead. The lights return. The sky returns to its ordinary black. The hum vanishes as if it never existed. But deep beneath the surface, something lingers, an echo in the magnetic field, a residue of order that wasn't there before. The models show that the resonance hasn't faded. It has stabilized. Earth's natural frequency is now slightly different, imperceptible to the ear, but changed forever. No one knows what will happen next. Some believe the event has ended, and others believe it has only just begun, that the signal wasn't a message to us, but a signal through us, that the universe has found a new voice and it's using Earth to speak. And somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes, a faint light flickers once again in the darkness, as if answering back. The hum had stopped, but silence didn't bring peace. For the first time in weeks, the air felt still, the sky motionless. Yet beneath the calm, something had changed. Every sensor, every magnetometer, every seismic monitor on the planet continued to register faint, rhythmic vibrations, too subtle for the human ear, but persistent enough to remind those who listened that the event wasn't over. It had simply entered another phase. Scientists called it residual harmonization. The rest of the world called it what it felt like, the pause before something speaks again. In the hours following the final pulse, confusion gave way to dread. The electromagnetic disturbances vanished, but the anomalies didn't. Compass readings remained erratic. Satellites reported positional drift, as though the space surrounding Earth had slightly warped. And perhaps most unsettling of all, people across continents began reporting the same dream, a horizon of light pulsing every 12 minutes, expanding outward until everything dissolved. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt like memory, a message that had imprinted itself into the collective human mind. Psychologists called it mass suggestion. Physicists weren't so sure. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, technicians made a discovery they refused to publish. The fragments of 3I/Atlas, once scattered across the solar system, were gone, not dissipated, not destroyed, simply missing. Every trace of the interstellar debris field had vanished from radar. Instead, a faint radiation trail now extended from Earth's orbit toward deep space, perfectly aligned with the direction of Lyra, the origin point of both 3I/Atlas and Oumuamua. It was as if the fragments had reassembled and departed, leaving behind the resonance that had rewritten the planet's electromagnetic signature. "It didn't visit us," said Dr. Respect Haito Moriyama during an unrecorded session at ESA. "It used us." The event wasn't transmission, it was calibration. The idea spread quietly among those who had seen the classified data. If the pulse had altered Earth's frequency, then maybe it had turned the planet into part of something larger, a node in a galactic network built not from machines, but from resonance itself. The realization was terrifying because if that were true, then the next step might already be in motion, invisible and unstoppable. And indeed, small but undeniable changes began to appear, tiny shifts in how matter behaved under certain conditions. In laboratories across the world, atomic clocks started desynchronizing in patterns that matched the golden ratio. Laser interferometers detected minute distortions in spacetime, repeating exactly every 12 minutes. Nature itself had begun echoing a pattern that didn't belong to it. Meanwhile, the faint radiation trail leading from Earth continued to intensify. Observatories tracking it noticed something impossible. The energy was not dispersing with distance, it was focusing, concentrating into a single direction, like a beam of invisible light stretching toward the stars. Some began to suspect that Earth wasn't just a receiver anymore, it was transmitting. By the third day after the event, atmospheric readings revealed a subtle but measurable rise in ionization across the upper layers of the planet. Auroras began appearing far beyond the poles, glowing faintly above deserts, forests, and oceans. Unlike the green and red veils of ordinary auroras, these new lights shimmered with hues of violet and silver, moving in slow, deliberate patterns that mirrored constellations. Some formed spirals that traced the same geometry found in the structure of 3I/Atlas. Others drifted to align with the Milky Way's core. The sky had become an instrument, and the planet itself was playing. The phenomenon spread quietly because few dared to acknowledge it publicly. The media, silenced by coordinated communication blackouts, called the lights ionospheric anomalies. And those who had been part of the research knew better. They recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same rhythm, slower now, but still there. The hum had returned, not as sound, but as light. That was when the data stream reappeared. The deep space network, once flooded by meaningless static, began to receive coherent bursts of information at 12-minute intervals. At first, they seemed like random noise, but when decoded into visual data, the signal revealed an image, faint, incomplete, but unmistakable. It was a star map, a chart of the Milky Way seen from far beyond human reach, dotted with thousands of luminous points. But there was something else, a series of markings forming a path across the galaxy, a thin arc connecting several stars. At the end of that path, a small circle glowed brighter than the rest, and beside it, a single coordinate flashed repeatedly, 18H36M56S plus 38DG4701. Lyra, the same direction from which 3I/Atlas had come. It wasn't just a return signal, it was an invitation. The next hours changed everything. "This is America," the term of me and myself. As the signal strengthened, the data began to include sequences of numbers, not random, but structured, prime sequences, mathematical constants, atomic ratios. Embedded within them were periodic interruptions that, when translated into binary, formed repeating patterns resembling instructions. It's a map, said Eliana Torres, her voice shaking as she decrypted the first layer. Not for us, for them. It's telling something out there where to go next. The realization hit everyone in the room at once. Earth wasn't the destination. It was a waypoint. The revelation triggered a panic at the highest levels. Governments initiated global emergency protocols. Fearing what might follow the signal, military satellites repositioned to track deep space anomalies, but none could identify the source. The radiation beam was no longer limited to Earth. It had expanded, connecting with the Sun, Jupiter's magnetic field, and even Saturn's rings, which began emitting faint radio echoes synchronized with the pattern. The entire solar system was becoming part of the transmission, a single colossal antenna. And then, suddenly, it stopped again. The signal cut off mid-pulse. The auroras faded. The sky returned to silence. But this time, there was no relief. Because moments later, every telescope on Earth recorded something no human had ever seen. A point of light appeared in the direction of Lyra, brighter than any star, expanding rapidly. Spectral analysis showed no stellar activity, no nova, no supernova. It wasn't light born from explosion. It was light traveling toward us. Within minutes, the glow intensified, spreading across constellations like a wave. Instruments detected massive gravitational distortions, as though space-time itself were folding inward along the path of the incoming light. Every 12 minutes, the wave accelerated, matching the same rhythm Earth had been transmitting. And then the final confirmation arrived. The object at the front of the wave was moving faster than light, not through space, but through space itself, bending it. The laws of physics were being rewritten in real time. Panic swept the planet. Air traffic halted. Power grids shut down. Across the world, billions looked up as a faint shimmer began to appear in the sky, a silver veil rippling like water above the clouds. No one could explain what it was: reflection, distortion, arrival, but every pulse of light from the stars above seemed to move through it, bending toward Earth. Scientists struggled to form words, politicians to form orders, but there were no words and no orders that could matter anymore, because now everyone could see it. The message from 3i/Atlas wasn't just a signal. It was a door, and the universe had just started to open it. It began as light, a shimmer across the night sky that defied explanation. To the naked eye, it looked like a distant aurora, a silver mist drifting silently across the stars. But to the instruments, it was something else entirely. Every satellite, telescope, and radar system in orbit began to fail simultaneously. The readings weren't just corrupted, they were rewritten. Frequencies folded in on themselves, coordinates dissolved into impossible numbers. It was as if space itself had become fluid, rippling under an invisible tide, and through that tide, something was coming. For hours, the planet watched in collective paralysis as the light in the sky intensified. It no longer shimmered, it pulsed, each wave perfectly synchronized to the rhythm that had haunted Earth for months. 12 minutes, then 6, then 3. The pulses shortened until they fused into a constant glow, turning the night into a dim, living twilight. The stars vanished behind the veil. The moon flickered, distorted like an image through water. The entire horizon seemed to breathe. In every city, millions stood in silence, staring upward as though witnessing the sky itself awaken. At the European Space Agency's command center, chaos reigned. The incoming wave wasn't just visible, it was measurable. Its energy signature matched that of 3i/Atlas's final pulse, amplified beyond comprehension. The wave wasn't traveling through space, it was reshaping it. Time dilation, gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic interference, all rising exponentially. Then came the sound, a deep, harmonic resonance that rolled through the atmosphere like the voice of the planet itself. Every structure, every object, every heartbeat vibrated in tune. It wasn't deafening, it was intimate. You could feel it inside your bones, inside your thoughts, as if the signal had moved from the stars into the human mind. Across the globe, people began to change, not visibly, but perceptually. Those most sensitive to the frequency, children, musicians, dreamers, started describing the same visions, geometric forms spiraling in endless motion, symbols made of light, a vast pattern unfolding behind their closed eyes. Some drew it, others sang it. Every depiction was identical. "It's not coming," whispered one girl during a televised interview before the broadcast cut out. "It's already here." Then, at 3 o'clock UTC, the veil broke. It didn't tear or explode. It bent, the air itself warped. And for a fraction of a second, the entire planet seemed to tilt in silence. Gravity weakened, oceans stilled, birds hung motionless mid-flight. The light from the sky folded downward like liquid glass, touching the upper atmosphere, creating a column that reached from the stars to the surface of the earth. Inside that column shimmered forms, not ships, not objects, but patterns of movement, like thoughts given physical shape. Every wavelength, from radio to gamma, resonated in unison. Instruments recorded a data stream that no computer could process, endless fractal sequences, self-encoding mathematics, recursive geometries that appeared to describe themselves. It wasn't information, it was intelligence, pure and formless, flowing like a tide into the planet's magnetic field. Governments ordered radio silence. Militaries scrambled jets, but their engines died mid-flight. The electromagnetic interference wasn't random, it was selective. Nuclear reactors shut down, yet pacemakers kept beating. Power grids collapsed, yet hospitals remained lit. The phenomenon didn't destroy, it redirected. It was as if some intelligence was rearranging the rules of energy, deciding what to keep alive and what to still. The world's machines fell quiet, and for the first time since the dawn of technology, humanity found itself alone with the sound of its own heartbeat, resonating with something vast and ancient. And then, in the silence, came the whisper. It wasn't a word, but every person who heard it understood it differently, yet meaningfully. For some, it felt like a memory. For others, a command. To one scientist in Chile, it sounded like the phrase, "Welcome home." To a child in Norway, it felt like, "Listen." To a dying woman in Tokyo, it was simply, "Remember." But whatever it was, it carried weight, not sound, but intent. The frequency had become language, the sky had become a voice, and the message was no longer being received by radios or telescopes, but by consciousness itself. In laboratories, those still functioning watched their monitors display something impossible. DNA samples under analysis began to vibrate microscopically, aligning in patterns that mirrored the structure of 3I/Atlas's light pulses. In deep sea sensors, whales responded to the same frequency with synchronized calls. Forests shifted with electromagnetic currents. Even the crust of the Earth began to resonate faintly. The entire biosphere was harmonizing, adapting. Whatever 3I/Atlas had set in motion was no longer external. It was internal. The event wasn't arrival. Hit them. It was integration. Then, at the precise moment when all systems converged, every screen on Earth, phones, televisions, computers, flickered once. No matter where, no matter if powered or not, every display showed the same image, a single glowing spiral. It rotated slowly, infinitely deep, its edges expanding outward like a tunnel of light. Beneath it, a sequence of numbers appeared, coordinates pointing not outward to the stars, but inward to the exact center of the Earth. The implication was terrifying. The message wasn't, "We are coming," it was, "We are already within." Panic spread across the globe. Governments collapsed under the weight of uncertainty. Satellites burned in the upper atmosphere. But amidst the chaos, something else began to happen. People stopped fearing. In cities and villages, in deserts and mountains, strangers looked at one another and felt a strange, unfamiliar calm. the fear dissolved as quickly as it had come, replaced by an emotion no language could describe, the feeling of recognition. It wasn't love, or awe, or surrender. It was something deeper, the sense of remembering something humanity had always known but had forgotten, a collective realization that whatever this was, it wasn't alien, was origin. As dawn broke across the planet, the veil of light began to fade. The resonance weakened, the hum subsided, the sky returned to black, the stars to their usual stillness. But nothing was the same. The instruments were useless, the equations obsolete. And yet, for the first time in history, there was no confusion, only understanding. The event had left no message, no command, no threat, just alignment. Earth was now part of something larger, something beyond comprehension, something awake. The universe had noticed itself through us, and somewhere far beyond, in the direction of Lyra, another pulse flickered, brief, deliberate, familiar. 12 minutes later, another,
And another.
a pattern expanding outward through the galaxy, spreading from star to star, system to system. The signal was no longer ours to receive, was ours to continue, because 3I/Atlas had never been a visitor. It had been a beginning,